everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Oluwabukola and this is Bake with Oluwabukola right here on Ninja Bakers TV. And today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know about baking. Everything you need to know about baking. You know, you see a beautiful recipe, it comes out well. You know, it comes out well when the person who owns the recipe is baking it. The person gives the recipe to you only for you to bake it and it doesn't come out the exact same way. And you're wondering what happened. Probably this person did not give me the same exact recipe he or she used. This person just decided to lie to me, because you can't tell me that cake I ate or that pastry I ate is the same thing I just baked and came out like this. So something is definitely wrong, and you just begin to question the motive of the person who gave the recipe to you. Oftentimes, it's not about the person who gave the recipe to you. It is about how you decided to bake the cake and how the cake chose to come out due to your baking process. There is so much more to be done when it comes to baking aside having a good recipe. And these and more are the stuffs we're going to be dissecting today together. So sit back, grab a bottle of Coke or something, or tea if you are on Fit Farm or something, and let me walk you through everything it is you need to know about baking. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please, this is a very good time to do that. Kindly click on the notification bell so you get instant notification for every time I drop a new video on the channel. And also don't forget to share this video with friends, and I would love to see your comments. Notice, and I did not finish everything in this video. Watch out for the part 2 of the concluding part of this video. Okay, so first thing first, let us talk about your floor in your bakery. The floor, the ground in your bakery, you know, the floor and everything, how leveled it is. When you bake, aside getting a good cake, I'm starting from leveling now. You know, there are times you bake your cake and you place it properly in the oven, but when it came out, it's tilted. So you need to cut so much of the cake. And a cake that was very high, let's say like a 4-inch cake or a 5-inch cake, automatically becomes a 2-inch high cake just because you had to cut off so much. The very first thing you need to do is, if you are facing this type, if you're having issues like this, every time it is you bake, your cake often comes out, you know, tilted to one side, is not properly layered, despite you doing all the work of, you know, leveling it properly in the baking pan, you also need to use a plumb to check the level of your floor. That is the ground where it is your oven is standing. So if the floor is tilted, the first thing you need to do is look for something like stones, pebbles and all, or wooden flat stuffs, you know, stuffs with flat stuff surface that you can use to level your oven, so that your oven is properly, you know, leveled. So what you just need to do at that point is that you put your plumb inside your oven, then you begin to balance the oven, you know, from the 4 angles of the oven before you get a perfectly balanced structure when it comes to your oven, so that the next time you bake any cake, your cake comes out leveled the way you want it, and you are not wasting your cake. Because when your cake comes out tilted all the time, you tend to always waste your cake. That is number 1. That is the very first thing you need to know. Okay, 2, the second thing you need to know when it comes to baking is you need to know your oven temperature. You know, when there are times I'm almost tempted to post videos, recipe videos, without telling you the duration, without telling you the temperature, because I know that we all don't use the same type of oven. Some persons use foreign ovens, some persons use locally made fabricated ovens. So because of this, you know, the temperature kind of like shifts, you know, is always not regular with everybody when it comes to baking. But one thing is for sure, most cakes bakes at 350 degrees, yes, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and gas mark oven number 4. So if your oven is a gas mark, is number 4. If it is the other way around. Most cakes bake at 350. Most pastries bake at 400. So when it comes to bread, when it comes to meat pie and the rest, most pastries tend to bake at 400. Okay, so I was talking about the temperature of your oven. So some ovens can be quite hot, very very hot, extremely hot, and some oven not really there, not as hot as it should be. Despite preheating the oven, you still realize that your cake goes into the oven and is rising. It rises with the rising temperature of the oven, which is not supposed to. And that is the reason why when you bake some cakes, it comes out sunken in the middle. It just goes back right into the middle because the cake did not bake immediately it entered into the oven. It stayed into the oven and was kind of like rising at the same time, while the temperature in the oven was also rising. So you need to understand your oven. You need to form a friendship with your oven so deep and so intimate that you understand your oven temperature, you understand when you need to start preheating, you understand when you need to do certain things when it comes to your oven. So if your oven is the type of oven that was locally fabricated and is usually very 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 hot, I advise you don't start preheating when you begin to mix. I advise you start preheating probably when you start adding the eggs. So that means you've creamed your butter and sugar, you've creamed, that takes quite a long period of time, which for those who uses the foreign made oven, you need to start preheating the oven even before you start to mix, especially when you're using an electric mixer. So but for those who uses locally fabricated ovens, I advise that if you know that your oven is usually very hot, I advise that you do what, that you begin to preheat your oven when you're halfway through the mixing process. That is number one for you. And the second thing you also need to understand when it comes to locally fabricated ovens or even foreign ovens that can be excessively hot is that you can get a bowl of water, a stainless bowl of water, put it inside the oven on the ground floor, so that what the water does for your cake is that while your cake is baking, ensure that the bowl of water is always there in the oven, but please don't forget to always bring it out after each baking period, and wash, and before you refill the water. Don't just leave the water there thinking that there's still water in there. No, please, you don't want to be a dirty baker. You always have to bring that out, wash the bowl, refill it, add fresh water before you begin the next batch of cakes. Okay, so what the water does for you is that it helps create evaporation inside the oven. So it serves as a coolant. It cools the oven a little bit. It helps you regulate the oven so that the oven is not too hot. Your cake doesn't just bake drastically, because even when your cake rises suddenly, what happens? You have dry cake. Your cake will dry cake. Your cake will have this dome top. It will be so, at the end of the day, you have to just trim off so much of the cake, because instead of the cake to come out baked and leveled, it's going to come out so domed because the cake rised suddenly, which was not, it's rised at the speed at which the cake baked inside the oven was just too much for the cake, and so the cake is going to come out too domed on the top and also very very dry, and nobody wants a dry cake, and definitely as a baker don't want a cake that is just too you don't want that, because you're going to be cutting. You just can't level that. You just have to cut, and at the end of the day you're also still wasting your cake. So that the trick with the water in the bowl always works for those who have whose oven gets just too hot for what it is they want to bake. So that is it about your oven. So get an oven thermometer. You can always get that. You can always get that from any oven bake item vendor. You can always get an oven thermometer from them so that you can hang it in your oven for you to understand the temperature of your oven and everything. And most importantly, don't forget, always time your cakes. Always time your cake. A cake that needs to bake for 60 minutes, when it's approaching 50 minutes, just go and peep through. I'm not telling you to open the door. Just go and peep through to see if your cake is getting there. And one other thing again, I want to talking about opening the doors of the oven. When I started baking newly, I remember I used to make that mistake. So the moment I perceive the aroma of the cake, I will quickly go and open the oven to check. Then what happens? So I will now realize that my cake is just beginning to bake. I'll close it. But funny enough, as a beginner baker, you're always just tempted. You're very, very eager. You just want to see what is going on with your cake in the oven. So I used to open the door of my oven. Oh my God. By the time the cake finished baking, what happens to the cake? The cake comes out, it's soggy, sinks in the middle, never bakes even, until I realized that I was doing the wrong thing. I was not supposed to open my oven that day. When I begin to perceive the aroma of my cake, it means that my cake is just beginning to bake. Yes, so your cake can sit in that oven for 10, 15, 20 minutes and it's just still gay, it's just still romancing the oven and everything. Then when you begin to perceive the aroma, when you begin to perceive it so strongly, it means that your cake is now beginning to do what? To bake. So avoid the temptation of opening the door of your oven while you bake. That's another thing you need to know. So what else again do you need to know about your baking? Because we just think it's about the recipe. It is not only about the recipe. A whole lot of stuff comes into play when it comes to baking. The next thing you need to know now is your creaming process. You know, days when we started baking traditionally, they will tell you, you know, the manual way where we use the wooden ladle, they will tell you to go in just one, you know, to go in just one direction. If you start with left, you're ending with left. If you start with right, you're ending with right, you know. And that you should cream and cream and cream until the sugar granules melt. Oh my God, I don't know who told us that thing. It's a myth, guys. It is a myth. Except you mill your sugar and you turn it into caster sugar, or you buy caster sugar and use it to bake. It's never possible. It can never happen for your sugar to melt completely while creaming with the butter. It never happens, guys. So it's just a myth. So what you want to do when it comes to creaming is that you do not want to over cream. We make this mistake of over creaming. When you over cream your butter and your sugar, if you're not careful, it gets to a point the fat in the butter begins to do what? Begins to separate. So you might not see it. There are some fat brands you will use and you will see that this thing literally is separated. You know, you might not see it, but when you begin to see it, is when you begin to add the egg. So when you now start adding the egg, what happens? You see that it curdles. It turns to cheese. You know, when you begin to add the egg, that is when you now see that your sugar and butter mixture with the egg in it has turned to cheese. You just see this cheesy like thing on top of it. It is because you mixed the butter and sugar so much, the fat, which is the butter or the margarine, literally separated. So when you begin to add the liquid, which is the egg, what happens? You see it begins to curdle up because you overmix. So what you just want to do is that one thing I advise beginners and everyone to do is that when you're creaming your butter or your margarine and sugar, just cream until the color of the margarine becomes pale. That's the trick. Cream until it does what? Until it becomes pale. So if it's a margarine or a butter that is kind of like yellowish in color, you want it to change color like maybe like ×2 or ×3 and you're good. You want it to change color, let me listen to that again. You want the color to change to like ×2 or ×3 and you're good. So you want it to look pale and not, the goal should not be the sugar should melt. The sugar can never melt. Oh my God, the sugar can never and will never melt. Okay, so that is going to help you, you know, jump into which I add, because one of the questions I usually get is that why is it that when I mix my sugar and my butter and my eggs, it curdles? It curdles because your fat has separated in the process of you trying to cream and cream and cream and cream for you to enable you melt the sugar in the recipe. Okay, so what other thing again do you need to know about baking so that when you bake any good recipe, it comes out exactly it is the way you want? Is you need to understand that when you add flavors to cakes, most flavors are quite bitter. The only flavor you can taste your vanilla flavor. Yes, most flavors extracts are quite bitter. So when you add the flavor to your cake, you want to beat that. You want that to mix evenly. Not really beating, but you want it to mix evenly. You don't want the flavor to stay in one place, as concentrated in one part of the batter. That when someone bites, God help you, is not the customer that is biting into that part. That when someone bites into the cake, there's just this bitterness. Yes, I've tasted that before, even in my own cakes. So please, when you add the flavor, don't just think, I see people just pour in the flavor and just use like a spoon to just, you know, to just do it like this, thinking that once they do that, that is it. No. When you add the flavor into the batter. You also want to mix it until it incorporates and it mixes properly. Everything needs to blend in. Everything needs to blend in baking. Nothing is as simple as it seems to be. Baking can be quite simple when you enjoy it, when you love it, when you understand it, but not everything in baking is as simple as you think it is. Everything must mix together. Okay, so when it now comes to your flour, yes, when it comes to the flour has something we activate when we need and mix and beat it. I'm not talking about when you beat eggs, I'm talking about beating, whipping it. When you do that, you activate the gluten in the flour. So when it comes to cakes, we do not want to activate the gluten in the flour. But when it comes to pastry doughs, we want to activate the gluten in the flour. What do I mean? When it comes to doughs like yeast-based doughs like bread, like donuts, we want to activate the gluten in it. But when it comes to baking powder or no rising agent based doughs like the ones for pastry doughs like for meat pie, for pies and all, we do not want to activate the gluten. So that is the reason why when you're baking cakes and you're mixing your cake batter, the moment you begin to add your flour, the baking flour, please ensure that you're doing what? That you reduce the speed of the mixer drastically. You need to bring it down now to low. You need to bring it down to low, and please do not pour all your flour at once. I have done that, been there, done that. No, it makes your cakes come out dry. Never ever ever pour in your flour at once. So what you want to do is that you want the flour to come into into the sugar, the fat and everything mixture gradually, probably in 3 parts or in 2 parts, but never you pour it in at once. And like I said earlier, please reduce the speed of your mixer. You do not want to activate the gluten in the flour. That is the reason why for some recipes, especially for yellow cakes and all, pound cakes and all, they will tell you to add milk. And that while you add the milk and you add the flour, you should add it simultaneously. What they are trying to do is that they are trying to use the dairy in the milk. They are trying to use it to calm down the flour when you add in the flour, so that you don't even activate the gluten at all. That is the reason why I personally love any recipe that has milk in it, that has dairy, either milk or buttermilk or yogurt. I love such recipes because it helps me calm down the flour, so that I don't activate the gluten in the flour. Because when you activate the gluten in the flour, what happens? Your cake will come out dry. Your cake will come out so strong. I don't even want to use the word dense, because a dense cake does not mean the cake is not good, because most pound cakes are dense cakes. So we've overused the word dense, that we think as bakers we're just afraid when we hear the word dense. Nobody wants a dense cake. Your cakes can be dense. Pound cakes are dense cake. Fruit cakes are usually dense cakes. So what we don't want is strong hard cake. So when you activate the gluten, what happens? Your cake comes out strong hard, and it's hard because due to the gluten in the flour that you've activated, it has absorbed all the moisture in your cake batter. Just almost like when you're turning eba. Sorry for my Nigerian audience, I want to believe you understand that. When you're turning eba, when you're turning eba, the gari is quite dry, so it wants lots and lots of water. It's the same thing with flour. Flour is quite dry, but funny enough, it can be as wet can be when you don't activate the gluten in it. But the moment you overactivate the gluten in it, it begins to look for water. It's almost like a thirsty camel, or like a thirsty elephant looking for water. So while in the oven, while it's baking, it absorbs and soaks up and swallows and drinks up all the water, all the moisture in the cake. And that is the reason why that when your cake comes out, your cake is as dry and as strong can be. So we do not want to activate the gluten in the flour. Okay, so now let me take it down to the ingredients. Yes, this is a vlog. It's going to be a lengthy one. Okay, and I think it's going to be, I'm going to drop this in 2 parts. So this is the part 1. I'm advising you to watch out for part 2, so that it's not too long. When it's too long, it can be quite, distracting when it's so long. So I'm going to be cutting this into part 2, a part 1 and 2 series. For the part 2, what you should expect in the part 2 of this vlog is I'm going to tell you everything about all the basic ingredients, the things you use in baking, And yes, see you guys in part 2. Love you. Bye.